Stories number 1. I was there when the apocalypse started. I was in the kitchen preparing dinner when I heard my husband, Philip, start talking to the TV. At first, I didn't pay any attention to him. He would frequently talk to the television, especially whenever he watched sports. It wasn't until he started raising his voice that I got concerned. Wanting to see what had gotten him all riled up, I went into the living room. "What are you watching?" The question was out of my mouth before I'd seen the TV. When I looked at the screen, all I saw was static. "I hate those kinds of people too," Philip snarled, ignoring my question. "I agree. They are what's wrong with the world." "Honey," I called out, "who are you talking to?" He heard me that time. When he turned his head to look at me, I gasped. His blue eyes had clouded over, making them look like the eyes of a corpse. "You." Philip spat. "You're one of them." He jabbed his finger at the TV. "One of who?" His tone of voice alarmed me, prompting me to take a step back toward the kitchen. "The world would be a better place without you and your kind in it." He pushed himself out of his recliner. "Please stop," I begged, "you're scaring me." "You should be scared." He took a step toward me. "It's time someone punished you for what you've done." "I don't know what you're talking about." I retreated further into the kitchen. "Get back here." He came after me with outstretched arms. Fearing for my safety, I grabbed the meat tenderizer I'd left on the counter and held it before me. "I don't want to hurt you," I warned. Philip grinned. "You can't hurt me," he said. "I'm one of the chosen ones." He touched his chest. "I mean it, Philip. Stay back." I lifted the tenderizer over my shoulder, readying it. "You don't get to tell me what to do." When he was done speaking, he lunged. I jumped back and swung the tenderizer. There was a sickening thud followed by a spatter of blood that splashed across my dress. Philip grunted and fell to the floor. When I looked down at him, I gagged. I could see bits of broken bone peeking out through his scalp along with little pinkish lumps I assumed were pieces of his brain. "I'm sorry," I sobbed. Just then, my back door slammed open and my neighbor, Madeline, ran inside carrying a baseball bat. She looked from me to my husband's body. "Thank God, you're okay," she sighed. "What the hell is going on?" I asked. Madeline shrugged. "I don't really know," she replied. "All I do know is that something on the TV has turned most of the men against us." "Why?" "I have no idea," she shook her head, "and we don't have time to worry about that. Right now we need to get out there and help as many women as we can." Stories number 2. My husband refuses to apologize for cheating on me. "So what did you want to discuss today?" We'd been coming here for months, ever since I discovered Stephen cheating on me. He'd said he'd do anything. I'd told him it was marriage counseling or divorce. So here we were. "This isn't working, Doc," my husband said. "It's been months, but it feels like she's still blaming me." "And why shouldn't I blame you?" I asked as I shifted my purse on my lap. "Was it my other husband who fucked some slut while I was watching the kids?" "Rebecca, I know you're angry, but remember, we have to remain calm and rational. Acting on emotion may feel good in the moment, but it doesn't help solve the problem." "What would, Dr. Morgan? What would solve the problem of my husband being a cheating bastard?" "Hey!" Stephen objected. I said I was sorry. "How many times do I have to apologize?" I looked at him in disgust. "Once would be a good start. But that would require you thinking you actually did something wrong. I've apologized plenty of times." "Actually, you haven't." "I'm sorry if your feelings are hurt, but if you'd been more available." "I'm sorry you're upset. But you're the one who refuses to let it go." "Those are not apologies." "You've never apologized sincerely." "Not once." Dr. Morgan looked over at my husband. "Is that true, Stephen?" He shrugged. "It wouldn't matter anyway. She's determined to be angry." "And why do you think that is?" "How the hell should I know?" Stephen exploded. "No matter what I do, she's angry. I pay the bills, spend time with the kids, she's still angry. What else can I do? Dr. Morgan looked over at me. That is the question, isn't it, Rebecca? What exactly do you want from your husband in order to move forward? I want to feel respected. Not like a maid and nanny, but a life partner. Someone who is listened to and valued, not dismissed and treated as too emotional, too unreasonable. Maybe if you'd start being reasonable, I'd start treating you that way. That's not helpful, Stephen. It's not my job to help, Doc. It's yours, and there it is. I said. He's never responsible for anything. It's always someone else's fault. Christ! Stephen exclaimed. What the hell do you want from me? Anything. Anything at all. You say you've been trying, but you couldn't even keep from going back to that whore. Stephen looked up, eyes wide. What? Oh, you thought I didn't know? I'm not stupid, Stephen. Remember when you had to run out for a work errand a couple of nights ago? I followed you. I saw you. With her. That's crazy. I haven't seen her in months, really? I wonder if she'd agree. Maybe we should ask her. I pulled the plastic bag with her severed head from my purse and slammed it on the table. Well, go ahead, talk to her. Maybe she'll be reasonable. Stories number 3. My girlfriend recently pointed out that not every household has an eye spoon. The what now? I believe her exact words were when I asked where she kept it. Eye spoon, I repeated. She stood there just blinking for what seemed like an absurd amount of time. I said again, drawing out the words. Spoon. I mimicked digging my eye out with a spoon, which in retrospect probably didn't accomplish much. To be fair, I hadn't needed an eye spoon for quite some time, decades in fact, so I figured she was in the same boat as me, and that she'd simply forgotten about it. Perhaps there were some regional differences as well, like they had another name for it maybe? Peeper popper or optic extractor or something. What the fuck are you talking about? Now my girlfriend, let's call her Kimberly, since that's her actual name, isn't normally that crude. Probably hormones or something, I figured. Women, am I right? But it did dawn on me that she seemed to have no idea what I was talking about, which quite frankly blew my mind. So I sat down with her on the couch, calmly explaining the intricate design and purpose of the household eye spoon. It's a spoon-shaped instrument, much like a spoon. Preferably you want one fashioned from surgical steel, but eye beggars can't be eye choosers, so any old fabric will suffice. Wooden versions tend to splinter, though. Something to think about. The operation is simple enough in its premise, but difficult to master. You need to firmly part the eyelids, and sort of slide the spoon under the lower one. You need to go deep here, so don't be afraid to put some force into it. Then there's a bending motion involved, what my grandpappy used to call the lights out, because it's a bit like flipping a light switch. Then, provided you did everything correctly, the eye should pop out of there like pus from a ripe blister. Over in a blink of an eye, as grandpappy would jest. At this point, Kimberly interrupted with several comments, most of which were along the line of, what? Or, what the actual fuck? Or, what the fuck is wrong with you? Or, why? I ignored the first 3, focusing instead on the why. Because of the worms, silly, I said. You take out the eye to clear out the infestation. Only way to do it, really. They don't usually come back if you're thorough enough, but sometimes, if you're too slow, they'd have laid eggs behind both eyes. And so you'll have to do a double pop as my grandpappy would have it. Thankfully I only ever needed one. Alas, Kimberly didn't seem to grasp the vital importance of the eye spoon, so I'm afraid I had to restrain her. She'll understand soon enough though, and then we'll get over this temporary bump in our relationship road. Caressing our baby daughter's swollen eye, I prepare my newly anointed household eye spoon. Over in a blink of an eye, I jest. Stories number 4. The upstairs couple's kids keep dying. Clarence and Jamie Wilson. Unit 206. 6 children in the last 9 years. Most of them have lasted for less than 5 months. It has always looked suspicious. Rumors of poisoning, shaken baby syndrome, or outright neglect have circled around them for years. But none of them have ever been proven true. No doctor has ever been able to find a cause for so many deaths. Each baby presents differently. One with multi-organ failure, another with fatal pneumonia, most recently a neonatal stroke. There has never been shred of evidence to suggest neglect, nothing to indicate they have ever inflicted any harm onto their children. Some consider it immoral to bring a child into this world knowing they will likely suffer the same fate. Jamie believes it is her only choice. Jamie lays little Jeffrey down in his crib. He is only 3 months old. A small tear streams down her face as she watches him break out into a coughing fit, quickly turning blue. Respiratory failure. She knows he stands no chance. Jamie lets out one deep sob and leaves him there. She walks down the hall into Kayla's room. Kayla lays in her usual position, the oxygen mask glued to her face. Based on the severity of her cystic fibrosis, the doctors predicted that she wouldn't live past 6. Yesterday, they celebrated her 12th birthday. Jamie knows she is only buying time. How many souls are worth the life of one child? It is not for me to decide. As long as she keeps her end of the bargain, I will continue to oblige. I watch Jeffrey take his last breath, and grant Kayla another year of life. Stories number 5. My husband begged me to go hunting with him. Harriet, James motioned, come here. I grabbed my rifle and made my way over to where James was sitting. Look, he whispered, pointing over the log we were hiding behind. I lifted my head high enough to see what he was pointing at. When I saw the large buck, grazing on the side of the hill about 200 yards away, I gasped. He's a big one, I said, ducking back out of sight so the deer wouldn't spot me. And he's all yours, James declared, assuming you can take the shot. After pestering me for the better part of a year, I finally agreed to join James on one of his hunting trips. I can take the shot, I assured him. I was no stranger to guns. I'd grown up around them and used to hunt regularly with my father and brothers when I was younger, but I stopped once I started high school. That was over 20 years ago. I've never told James about it though. I raised the rifle and rested it on a log, using the scope to line up my shot. You might have better luck if you get closer, James suggested. I continued to line up my shot until I realized he was right. There were too many obstacles between me and the deer. If you can make it over to those rocks, you'll have a clear shot. James pointed at the collection of boulders between us and the deer. Maybe, I said, looking to see if there was a way for me to make it over to the boulders without scaring the deer away. I found a path via a series of fallen trees and smaller rocks, but I had to crawl most of the way to get there. When I looked back from my new position, James gave me a thumbs up. It's showtime. I set my rifle between 2 boulders and aimed it at the deer. Bang! I pulled the trigger, sending my bullet way off target and scaring the deer away. I had no intention of shooting it. I just wanted James to think I did so he'd finally make his move. I didn't have to wait long. Bang! James's rifle echoed through the forest. But the bullet he'd intended for me never left the barrel. His rifle had misfired, sending a piece of shrapnel right through his eye and into his brain, killing him instantly. With a smile on my face, I got up and walked back to where his body was, happy to see that the modifications I'd made to his rifle the previous night had worked as intended. I knew the only reason James wanted me to go hunting with him was so he could plan an accident and collect on the life insurance policy he'd recently taken out on me. That's how you kill your spouse and make it look like a hunting accident, I said to his lifeless body. Stories number 6. The hotel where I work handles difficult guests in the best way possible. I've been waiting for towels for over an hour, Mrs. Schmidt complained. I'm sorry, I apologized, I'll go get you some. I stepped away from the desk and into the back room where we kept some extra supplies. Here you go, I set a stack of towels on the counter. Is there anything else I can help you with? Actually, there is, she said, you can upgrade my room like you did for that couple. I'm sorry, but I can't do that. Why not? She raised her voice, you did it for them. She swept her arm toward the couple who were stepping onto the elevator. That wasn't my decision, I explained, my manager upgraded them because the room they were staying in had a leak. My room has a leak too, Mrs. Schmidt quickly blurted out, which I knew was a lie. I can have maintenance come to your room, I countered. I don't want maintenance to come to my room, she snapped, I want a new room. I can't just give you a new room. What seems to be the problem? My manager, Brenda, who was watching the exchange between Mrs. Schmidt and me on the cameras, stepped out of her office. Mrs. Schmidt would like us to upgrade her room, I explained. Is there something wrong with the room you have now? She asked Mrs. Schmidt. The bathtub leaks, she lied, and there is a weird smell in the room, she added. I'm sorry to hear that, Brenda replied, of course we'll upgrade you. Put her in room 322, Brenda said to me. Are you sure? I asked. I'm positive, Brenda smiled. Okay, I prepared a new keycard and handed it to Mrs. Schmidt, who snatched it out of my hand with a smug look on her face. Let us know if we can be of any further help, Brenda said sarcastically as Mrs. Schmidt turned around and walked back towards the elevator. 10 minutes later, Mrs. Schmidt called the front desk from room 322. I think you put me in the wrong room, she said. Why do you think that? I replied. There's somebody else's suitcase sitting on the bed. Really, I pretended I didn't know why the suitcase was there. There shouldn't be. Well, there is, she sounded annoyed. It might have been left behind, I said. Can you do me a favor and open the suitcase and see if you can find any kind of identification inside? You want me to open it? Yes, please. Okay. I heard her unzip the bag. As soon as it was open, the sound of rushing air was all I could hear. This was followed by a scream as Mrs. Schmidt was sucked into the void that was inside the suitcase. I waited until the sound receded before I hung up and called housekeeping. Can you please send someone up to clean room 322, I said. The guest that was staying there has decided to check out early. Stories number 7. My daughter's boyfriend broke up with her. Have you seen Ruby? I asked my husband. She said she wanted to go shopping with me, but I can't find her anywhere. Have you looked outside? He replied. Last time I saw her she was sitting on the dock down by the pond. I sighed. The only time Ruby went down to the pond was when she was having boy trouble. I guess I better go and talk to her, I said. Ruby turned around when she heard my shoes thump across the wooden planks of the dock. You okay? I asked when I saw her tear-streaked cheeks. I'm fine, Ruby replied. Want to tell me what happened? Boys suck, Ruby cursed. You're going to have to be a little more specific than that, I prodded, trying to get her to open up. Zach broke up with me, Ruby sobbed. Why did he do that? I asked as I took a seat on the dock beside her. I thought that everything was good between the two of you. Candace convinced him that I had something to do with Ryan's disappearance, she sniffled, and that if he didn't want the same thing to happen to him, he should stop seeing me. Ryan was Ruby's boyfriend from the previous year. He'd disappeared months ago and nobody had seen him since. Why would she say that? I asked, wanting to get a little more information out of her. Everyone knows I was the last person to see Ryan before he disappeared, Ruby said, and it's only a matter of time before they figure out what happened to him. Nobody is going to find out about what you did to Ryan, I insisted, as long as you stick to the story. I placed my arm around her shoulders. Everything will be fine, I continued. Zach will be back. You'll see. No, he won't, Ruby replied. Sure, he will, I tried to sound as convincing as possible. You just need to give him some time to come to his senses and realize how unhappy he is without you. In the meantime, you need to keep a level head, don't do anything rash. Too late for that, she gestured at the water next to the dock. Seriously, Ruby, I snapped. Just below the surface of the water I could see Zach's lifeless eyes staring up at me. Go get your father and then go to your room, I said. You're grounded. Stories number 8. My mum draws a picture every day on my lunch bag. They have gotten progressively more worrying. It's a habit she's had since I first started kindergarten. Back then, it would be my favorite cartoon characters colorfully drawn in scene, cute quotes and words of encouragement. As I entered my teens, the colors tapered off a bit and the drawings seemed to reflect my teenage moody self. A lot of deep purples, blacks and whites were used to create scenes of stormy weather, ocean waves and roller coaster rides. Honestly, I'd mostly forgotten about the lunch bags. I'm not a teen, certainly not a child anymore. I hadn't had a packed lunch in years. Hadn't thought about the drawings. But recently, my luck changed. I was fired from work, my fiancé left me the same week. Suddenly I found myself back at my mother's home, sleeping in my small childhood bed, surrounded by posters and stale memories. Weeks passed, and on my first day at my new job, Mom presented me with a packed lunch. When I got my break at lunchtime, seeing my mother's drawing of a man dressed in a suit, briefcase in hand, a large grin on his face. Have a happy day, son, Mom had written in bright green marker. It's been a couple months now. I like my new job. I enjoy living with Mom. But things have gotten strange. I started noticing the drawings on my lunch bag were becoming odd. Last Tuesday, for instance. I took out the paper bag, ready to enjoy my salami salad roll, to be greeted by carnage. Black and red scribbles, the writing mostly intelligible, apart from one sentence I could make out, help me. I went home sick, even though I wasn't technically unwell, I was sick with worry. But when I got home Mom was fine, sitting on the porch staring off into the woodlands, and when I asked her about it she just gave me a small smile and shrugged it off. The rest of the week the drawings got more vulgar, more graphic. I have tried to talk to Mom about it. She's been locked in her room most of the week, only leaving to pack me a lunch every day, it seemed. She will not come out when I knock. I tried to brush it off. Tried to find explanations. By the next Friday, the drawing was simple. There were no unreadable words, no messy scribbles. A detailed sketch of a single gravestone under a willow tree. My name, in delicate cursive, carved into the tombstone. I left work immediately, and got home to an empty house. It took a while, but after pleading with Mom to be let in, only to be met with silence, I took matters into my own hands and busted down the door to her bedroom. I'm not sure how long she has been dead for, but her mummified state tells me it's been a while. I don't know who has been drawing on my lunch bags lately, but I know it wasn't my mother. Stories number 9. We couldn't go to the fair, so Mom brought the fair to us. Hey, kids, Mom said as she came into the room, I've got a surprise for you. Are we going to the fair? My sister, Janice's, face lit up at the prospect. I'm sorry, honey, Mom frowned, we can't go this year. But you said, Janice started to protest but Mom cut her off. I know what I said, and I'm sorry, Mom apologized, but we just can't afford it. What's the surprise? I asked. My mom turned to me and smiled, since we couldn't go to the fair. I brought the fair to you. What? That sounded impossible. Well, it's not the real fair, she clarified. What kind of fair is it? Janice asked. Come downstairs and see, she motioned for us to follow. Not knowing what to expect, the two of us followed her down the stairs where we found that she had turned the living room into a series of carnival game booths. constructed out of cardboard and various items she'd found around the house. They all looked really lame, but I could tell Mom had put a lot of work into them, so I didn't say anything. Janice, who was 4 years younger than me, was more forgiving of them. "Are there prizes?" she asked. "There are," Mom replied. "They're over there." She pointed at the dining table, which held several plates worth of cookies and cupcakes that she'd baked, along with a few stuffed animals that she'd clearly picked up at the thrift store. "Are you ready to play?" Mom held up some Monopoly money for us to use to pay for the games. Not wanting to disappoint her, I took the fake money and decided to play along. "What's that game?" I asked, pointing to the one that was covered with a sheet. "That's a special game," Mom replied. "Can I play it?" I asked. "You can." She walked over to the table, "but it costs $5 and requires you to wear one of these blindfolds." She held up the strip of cloth. "Okay," I agreed, handing her the appropriate money. While Janice busied herself with the ring toss game, Mom put the blindfold on me and escorted me under the sheet. "All right," she said, "this game is very simple. All you have to do is pop a balloon with one of these darts." When she said the word darts, she lifted my hand and placed 3 darts in my palm. "Ready?" I nodded. She stood behind me and positioned my body. "Throw them whenever you're ready." I threw all 3 darts in rapid succession and was happy to hear 2 of them pop balloons. "Great job," Mom declared before removing my blindfold. When I saw Dad, who was bound and gagged and covered in balloons, with a dart sticking out of his left eye, I almost puked. "Don't worry, honey," Mom said, "this is just your father's way of repaying us for spending all our fair money on beer." Stories number 10. My son got called into the principal's office. What he did made me sick to my stomach. When I got to the principal's office, he gingerly placed a small sandwich bag onto his desk. Inside was half a dozen bloody teeth. "Miss Boyd," Marcus went around at recess hunting down anybody with a loose tooth. He ripped these all out and stole them for himself. "I am so sorry," I said. "He's never done anything like this before. It'd be best if Marcus went home for the day." "Yes, of course, I'll take him right now." I got up to leave, but the principal stopped me. "Would you mind taking the teeth with you?" he said. "If I look at them any longer, I'm gonna hurl." "Sure," I said. The drive home was silent. I wanted to yell at Marcus, but at the same time I knew this was partially my fault. Yesterday Marcus lost his final baby tooth, but I didn't have any change for the tooth fairy. All I had in my purse was a 20, so I thought, what the hell? It's his final tooth, so why not give him the 20? The money must have gone to his head. He had taken enough teeth at school to get over $100. "Marcus," I said, "you're old enough now that I think you should know there's no such thing as the tooth fairy." "Yes there is," Marcus said, scowling. "No, baby, Mommy's the one who puts money under your pillow at night. I saw her." "What?" "He was fast asleep when I put the money under his pillow. She made me get her more teeth. She said she'd hurt me if I didn't." "Marcus, this isn't funny. The tooth fairy isn't real, and what you did at school was cruel. Go to your room and think about what you did." "Fine," Marcus cried, and ran out of the car. I went inside and realized I still had the bag of teeth in my pocket. I threw it away in the kitchen and got on with my day. That night I had a terrible nightmare. I was lying down in bed when someone small opened the door. At first I thought it was Marcus, but then I saw their face. White and angular, with an impossibly large smile that went ear to ear. She wore a white dress, had white hair, and white eyes with no pupils. I wanted to get up, but I was paralyzed. She jumped onto the bed and crawled onto my chest. She opened my mouth, reached in, and grabbed one of my teeth, then pulled. I woke up screaming. I put my fingers in my mouth, but thankfully my teeth were all there. That was fucked up. I went downstairs to make myself a cup of tea and shake off the nightmare. When I threw the tea bag into the trash I heard something. A clinking that could only be one thing. I looked in the trash, and there in the sandwich bag was half a dozen bloody coins. Stories number 11. If all your friends jumped off a bridge, would you? It was 11 a.m. on the dot when the first car drove off the bridge. Poor soul, my wife had said, they were probably texting and driving. I nodded in agreement, though I had seen no phone in her hand as I had passed her. The bridge had been stuck for over an hour now. We were boxed in on all sides, so we couldn't turn around, but this bridge was the only way to my mother's anyway. A second car veered off the road, but this time, we had been stopped when it happened. What do you suppose that was? I asked. We were already stopped. Maybe they forgot to put their brakes on, my wife suggested. Or maybe they wanted to die anyway, and the traffic gave them an opportunity. You're probably right, I said, but it didn't stop the growing sense of unease in my stomach. My phone rang. It was Blake, my brother, from the car behind me. I answered. What do you think made those people drive off the bridge? Blake asked. Not sure, I replied. They must have had a reason, Blake continued. Nobody drives off a bridge to their death for no reason. Guess we'll never know, I said before hanging up. A third car drove off the bridge, taking another car with it as they rammed them from the inner lane. Then another, until it was a steady stream of cars. Why are they doing this? What do they know that I don't? I looked frantically to my wife, but found no comfort in her staring at her phone. More cars drove off the bridge. Is the bridge going to collapse? Did something happen? Is surviving really a fate worse than death to these people? Another car drove into the water, and the bridge attendant got a pained look on his face and jumped off the bridge. What are they not telling us? I asked my wife. These people have to have a reason to be killing themselves. My wife looked annoyed. I don't know. Maybe they planned a group suicide today or something. Let's just focus on what we can control. But I couldn't stop thinking about it. What horrors waited out there for us? That's when I saw Blake's car behind me drive off the bridge. That's it. If Blake did it, whatever is out there has to be really bad. I don't want to keep living in a world with, whatever this is. I turned the wheel all the way to the left and gunned it before my wife could stop me. As I was crashing towards the water, the last thing I heard was the radio. Breaking news, self-driving cars all over the world veer off the road today due to a glitch in the update. Stories number 12. I told my wife, no matter what, she can't look. She binds my hands with the rope. A lot of good it will do. Is that tight enough? My perfect wife asks. Tighter. Next, comes the chains. Unfortunately they are just steel. Only meant to slow me down as much as they can. Do you have any idea how expensive silver chains would be? We're talking tens of thousands of dollars. Steel will have to do. I'll probably break them anyway. My wife guides me into my cage in our basement. I have to tell her to stop calling it the kennel. I'm sensitive about dog jokes. She snaps shut every lock, all 20, and places the small amount of silver we do in the cage. This cage is a fortress. Should be impossible to get out of. Comfy? She asks. It's not supposed to be. The full moon will be here soon, baby, you should get upstairs and lock the door. I was thinking. Not this again, please. She gives me the puppy dog eyes. Normally I can't resist the puppy dog eyes. But on this I won't budge. It's too dangerous. When I transform into the wolf, even the scent of you could drive me into a frenzy. A frenzy? She blushes. I just want to take a peek. That's all. Just an eensy-weensy peek. It's kind of hot, you turning into a wolf. Hot? This is a curse. Hey! Don't talk about yourself like that. You're not cursed. I love my werewolf husband. I just think it'd be something to see you like that. Izzy, promise me you will lock the door and stay upstairs until morning. She hesitates, not even a tiny little peek. No. Ugh. Fine. She pouts all the way up the stairs and locks the door. The transformation is always somehow worse than I remember it. It starts with my nose. Suddenly, it's like every smell in the house is ramming up my nostrils. The mildew, garbage. My only solace is my wife's perfume punching through the air. Then it's the needles. No, razor blades. Like someone dragging a million razor blades all over my skin. Just when the nightmare really begins, and agony consumes me, everything fades to black. The wolf takes over. And then it's over. I always wake up groggy, confused. I've managed to break the chains, but I'm still in the cage. Thank God. But something is wrong. I smell blood. No. Oh God. I look out the cage and see my wife, scratched to hell. Pale. Blood is everywhere and she's missing her arm. She must have reached into the cage to try and pet me. Where's the arm? I look all over. Oh fuck, did I eat the arm? I gag, and throw up some bile. Why didn't you listen? I scream, as tears stream down my face. I pound on the locked bars in front of me. There has to be a way out. Stories number 13. I can't open our pickle jar. I think my husband tightened it on purpose. Mix 1 part Kharkov vodka to 2 parts V8 spicy hot, stir in a pinch of salt and pepper, add a pickle spear, and serve in a tall glass with ice. That's how my husband liked his Bloody Mary, only unfortunately I can't get our pickle jar open. My mother warned me about this. She said sometimes a man will make you need him. My husband would never do that. He loves me and only wants what's best for me. Like, when I got pregnant, he said I should quit my job and focus on raising our baby. He wanted to take care of me and our child. Even still, I cannot open the pickles. I can't seem to get a good grip. I think that, yeah, he might have tightened it on purpose. I hate to admit it, maybe he is trying to make me dependent on him. My mom said her ex-husband did things like that. He'd tighten the jars in the fridge so that she'd have to come to him for help. Beg him to open them for her. He'd wield that power over her, and so much worse. She said she left him high and dry before he had the chance to ruin her life, or furiously end it. It's the little things he'd do. Those were the worst. Made me question my sanity, until I realized he was full of shit. I never went back. No, I'm probably overthinking things. My husband just tightened the lid without realizing it. He's big and strong, after all, I'm sure it was an accident. Besides, it's not like he's being controlling in other ways. Well, I mean, he did get mad when I suggested we shouldn't go through with the pregnancy. The economy sucks right now, and paying for daycare would be a nightmare. I hate to admit it, but that was the first time he got physical. I just wanted to be more financially secure before I quit my job, but he freaked out. He apologized right after though. He just lost his temper. Regardless, I cannot open this goddamn pickle jar, and I know I'm gonna have to ask him for help to get it open. I hate having to ask him to help with silly things like this. It makes me feel weak and pitiful, but that's the price I pay for being a housewife. Hubby, can you come here please? I cried. He didn't respond, but he walked into the kitchen anyway. Can you help me open this jar? I asked. The lid is too tight. My husband didn't even look at me. He just stared right through me, grabbed the jar of pickles, and walked off with it. Excuse me, I said, following behind him. What am I, minced meat? When I followed him into the living room, my corpse was lying there on the ground, and my husband chewed on a pickle, thinking about how he was going to dispose of my corpse. Stories number 14. My girlfriend's cat got outside and is missing. At least that's what she thinks. Babe, the tape. I hand my girlfriend a strip of Scotch tape. We've been driving all around town putting up missing posters for her cat. The cat's name was Stevie, but she always called him Stinky. I always thought that was cringe. Looks like we're out of posters, I said. What do you think? Time to call it? I want to keep looking, she said. We hop in the car and she starts driving to the edge of town. The thing is, I know this cat isn't missing. And before you jump me and freak out, I didn't hurt the cat, okay? So take a breath. Stevie is 15 years old. Ancient. Starting to have some health problems. Expensive problems. I'm trying to start a life with my girlfriend. I want to have kids, but her maternal instinct is all screwed up because of this dumb cat. Where are you driving? I asked. To the woods, she said. Anyways, I just humanely, dropped the cat off at a shelter. Nothing nefarious here. I just want to marry my girlfriend and be able to afford kids, not have to pay 20 grand for cat surgery. Come on, babe, my girlfriend said. Someone texted me that they might have seen Stinky in the woods. Hell, I love the girl. I humor her and follow her into the woods. We're pretty deep when I see a freshly dug hole in the ground. The shovel standing up sticking out of the pile of dirt. You know, my girlfriend says, when Stinky went missing the first thing I did was call every shelter in the city. He's safe, by the way. I picked him up and he's at my mother's. She pulls out my .32 revolver. Hey! That's not a toy. She shoots one in the air and points it back at me. Get in the hole. It's not what you think. I want to get married. Have kids. I love you. You need to get over that old cat. I get in the hole. Get over Stinky. I'm over you. She fires 3 times in my stomach. The bullets punch through me. It hurts so bad I can't even move. She starts shoveling the dirt on me. You haven't killed me yet. What are you doing? It's just a cat. Please, shut up. I'm burying you alive. Stories number 15. I finally asked him to leave his crazy wife. When are you going to leave her? I had promised I wouldn't ask, but it slipped out. Don't get me wrong, I was enjoying having an affair. Loving it. The sneaking around. The burner phone. There was an element of danger that made me feel alive. But I'm a jealous woman. I don't want to keep sharing. My wife, Jeffrey said. Here came the excuses. You don't know what she would do to you. If she ever found out. You left your phone at home, right? Yes, I said, taking off the wig and bulky coat I purchased as a disguise. Nobody saw you come here. I used an old-fashioned yellow cab. I paid cash. He dropped me off 5 blocks away. No one could possibly know I am here, okay? I know your wife is crazy, but you sure go to some extreme lengths. I threw my disguise on the disgusting ground of this pay-by-the-hour motel. I sat on the bed and swear I heard a crunch from the crust of the sheets. Better safe than sorry, he said. I just think we could avoid all this if you were honest with her. You don't even need to confront her. Just have a lawyer serve her the divorce papers. Oh, I wouldn't divorce my wife. Why not? The motel door popped open, and I recoiled as a woman entered. It was Jeffrey's wife. Shit. After all the precautions. How did she find us? Hello, my love, Jeffrey said. Excuse me, I brought the tarp, his wife said. What the hell is going on? Jeffrey grabbed a duffel bag hidden behind a chair. Metal tools rattled inside as he spoke. Do you know how hard it is to get away with murder these days? Ring doorbells are on half the homes. Cameras everywhere. Advances in DNA evidence. Cell phones tracking your every location. God. It's almost impossible. Unless you find a victim who doesn't want to be found. Like someone hiding an affair. His wife pointed a gun at me. Did you remember the saw, babe? Of course, my love, that's your favorite part. Stories number 16. I am not guilty, but I wish I was. For the last 10 years, I received a letter on November 10th from the state penitentiary. He never forgot my birthday, never forgot anything actually. And though I hadn't been able to stomach a visit where I'd have to sit across from the monster wearing my brother's skin, I still read his letters. Because for a moment, while I pored over the neatly scripted words, I could repress what he did. For a moment, I could just remember him as he was when we were children, the smartest person I'd ever known, and my best friend. Not the murderer. Not the devil. That afternoon will be burned in my brain forever. Coming home from school, the smell of iron when I entered the house, the sound of my brother sobbing in their bedroom. The sight of my parents' bodies, shredded beyond recognition. It was the day I became an orphan. I was only 15 when they put him away for 2 consecutive life sentences. He never spoke a word in his defense, never gave an explanation. And I never forgave him. But even considering I didn't respond, he still continued to write my annual birthday message, usually recounting some happy memory from our childhood. Yet this year was different. No birthday wish, no cheerful recollections, just a list of numbers. 9 to 3, 1 to 20, 3 to 17, 8 to 11, etc. It didn't take me long to understand that they were references to words in each of his previous 9 letters. And it did not take me long to uncover the following cryptic note. Jason, you are the only one who might believe me. I have not killed anybody. I made a mistake. My friends and I played a game with a board. Something attached to me. It began to stalk me. I noticed first my reflection. Sometimes it would not match my face. Eventually I saw it in my room. A double. Terrible. Evil. It mutilated Mom and Dad. It was going to come for you next. I had to go to prison to protect you. It has killed all of my cellmates. It is insatiable. Starving since they put me in solitary. It tortures me for release. I must end it. Please forgive me. I am not guilty, but I wish I was. It would be so much simpler that way. Happy birthday. I love you, Richard. On the 11th, I received a call that Richard had hung himself in his cell. When they asked what I'd like to do with his body, I told them to inter him there, not sure I trusted any of his final message, not feeling it right to have him rest with our parents. But I did attend the burial to say goodbye. I touched his cheek before they put him in the ground. And when I did, I felt something. Like a stranger watching me from the shadows. Then today, I swore, when I moved away from the mirror, my smiling reflection lingered behind for a second. Stories number 38. This man thinks I'm Anna, but I'm not. My eyes open, but there's nothing to see. Darkness and confinement surround me in what feels like a coffin. Legs bound, arms restrained, mouth gagged. No idea how I ended up here. I fight against the restraints, desperately hoping for something to snap and release me. It's pointless. Footsteps draw closer, until they stop nearby. The surface in front of me creaks open like a door, and the room's light blinds me. As my vision improves, I see a man standing before me, staring with meticulous interest. Good afternoon, Anna, he says. I've watched you for so long. Seen you countless times leaving your house, going to the store, to work, to the gym. But now, you're mine, he finishes. And on his face, a terrifying smile spreads. I try to scream, to tell him something's wrong, that I'm not Anna. But the gag muffles every sound I make. Who is Anna? He steps out of sight, and I hear him handling something across the room. Then a shrill, piercing sound erupts. The man reappears with a drill in one hand and pliers in the other. What he did to my body was terrible and unending. Every inch of me burned with pain until everything went dark. And my eyes opened again. I'm lying on a metal bed, still in shock from the agony. Wires trail from my nose and ears. A woman in a lab coat approaches and removes them. "You may get up, Mr. Elliot," she tells me. My body is intact. I rise, questioning her about what I had just experienced. "What you witnessed was the murder of Anna Bauer, which occurred in September 2034, she informs me. "You killed her in the attic of your residence, and reliving the event is part of your sentence." I catch my reflection in a metallic surface and recognize the face of the one who caused my suffering earlier. What she went through was horrific, I tell her, tears streaming down my face. She offers a sympathetic smile. "It's common to feel that way after this procedure, Mr. Elliot," she confides. "But as soon as you're ready, we'll need to proceed to the next operation." There are still 12 girls left. Stories number 17. I just killed my soulmate. Twice. Soulmates, a very real tangled red thread binding two hearts. Two brains. Two souls. Whether they liked it or not. Unfortunately, I was bound to a fucking psychopath, reckless teenage detective, Nicholas Sparks, who didn't understand the concept of a soulmate. Soulmate, bound through emotion and thought. So, despite me sitting in class anxiously tapping my pen on the edge of my desk, my life partner was halfway across town, tracking down a missing middle schooler. Nicholas didn't understand that I could sense his gritted teeth as he struggled to pick a lock with a toothpick, his toothpaste breath, cherry-flavored lips, courtesy of him making out with fellow Scooby Gang member, Fallon, 5 minutes earlier. This guy was a mess, and unfortunately, he was my mess. "Can you be careful?" I mentally hissed. He rolled his eyes, not the biggest fan of our binding, either. "At least I'm not a coward." He mentally sang back. I sensed the warm glow of his flashlight, his voice a murmur. "JJ, can you help me find the kid?" I held my breath as he strode forward, his fingers wrapped around something warm, JJ's wrist. When he let out a strangled laugh, it was contagious, and somehow, I felt my own lips curving into a smile. "There she is." I dropped my pen when he darted forwards. "Call Sheriff Adams." Relaxing, I slumped into my chair. Before. Pain. It started dull, before exploding down my spine, ripping the breath from his lungs. His scream was agonizing, barely hitting the sound barrier, but through my mouth, it tore me from my seat, something warm and metallic shooting up my throat. Blood. I spat it out, but I was already losing him, his thoughts, entangled and muffled and fading. Fuck. I didn't. What happened? JJ, what the fuck? Did I tell my mom I loved her? Did I? Despite his voice fading in and out like ocean waves, I could still feel him. Falling. Plunging into darkness, blood clinging to him, seeping from every orifice. I found Nick gutted in a warehouse, laying on his back, his eyes still open. Dead. But he didn't feel dead to me. His presence was suffocating, drowning me, screaming at me to run, at me to talk to his mom, tell her he loved her, tell Fallon. I was barely aware of myself on my knees, a screech clawing through my teeth. He was so loud. Afraid. Crying. Grabbing the knife that pierced his stomach, I plunged it into his heart, unraveling the tangled, blackening thread binding us, and severed it, finally cutting us apart. But he was still there. Screaming. Even buried, Nicholas won't leave me alone. He's a dead weight attached to me, a body I can't cut away, dragging me down. And as I stand on the edge of my apartment building, 15 years later, his pained cry in my head, I know exactly how to get rid of my soulmate. Jump, he whispers. I do. Stories number 18. I've always been the outsider of the village, ever since what happened. Growing up where I grew up, I was always the outsider. I never got on with the other children in the village. The children that have now grown up to be the policemen, the shopkeepers, the butchers, the village itself. They're a small community in rural Scotland. Barely 400 people. 800 eyes looking at me every time I'd go to town for food. My mother hasn't been able to go for some years now. Her health becoming so bad she can hardly walk. Bless her. My father was the one who causes this. He was an adulterer. He was once the husband of Victoria McIntyre, son of Donald McIntyre, the royals of our small community. He impregnated one of the village whores, my mother, and caused Victoria to kill herself. My father fled, leaving myself and my mother to become the victims of their anger. Scowled at, spat at, shouted at, punched, kicked, tripped, hospitalized. We couldn't leave as no one would buy our house. Money was tight. This is all we knew. Hours away from the nearest city and miles from the nearest other town. The only work I could get was on the gas line that runs through the village. An old dangerous thing that could blow at any moment. It's filthy work and it's a one-man job. That's why I got it, I suppose. That's when I got the call from my mother. She felt terrible. She needed medical assistance. I'd raced to tell the village doctor, who said so dismissively, "Here's some sleepy pills. Tell her to take a few and she'll be fine." I ran to the local fire service. I'm sure they'd know CPR. Mike McLaughlin laughed as he sipped his tea. "Ha! Our fire engine's out of order. Not that we'd waste fuel going to your cursed little place anyway." I flagged down a local policeman. "Huh? Who was there for Victoria McIntyre when she died?" That's what I thought. By the time I returned home she'd passed. Her cold body, dead on the floor. I returned to the village only hours later. Just after I'd buried her, finishing my work on the gas line. I remember my mother always warning my teachers and classmates when I was at school. She'd come in to pick me up after I'd been beaten senseless again by the other children, and say with tears streaming down her face, "You know, the child who is not embraced by the village will burn it down to feel its warmth." I chuckled as I remember this. As I lit the fuse that would ignite the gas line. As I thought about the sleeping pill Dr. Graham had given me that I'd slipped into Fireman McLaughlin's tea. As the explosion rung out. As the screams of the villagers burning alive, with no one coming to their aid, soothed my ears like a breath of fresh air. And I'm not even cold. Stories number 19. I have to feed the man in my basement every night. I timidly turned on the basement light, the small bulb that illuminates the narrow staircase flickering into life. I've been doing this for 11 years. Never gets any easier. Down one step I go. I hear the scraping of the chains on the concrete floor, and the moaning of the man's distorted voice. A distorted voice that perfectly reflected his monstrous appearance. Down another step I go. I can see his silhouette hunched over in the furthest, darkest corner of the basement. The smell of rotting meat and fish from meals gone by hits me in the face like a truck, a stench I've never gotten used to. Down another step I go. I thought back to the day I was first tasked to feed the man in my basement. I was 16 years old. My father was upstairs on his deathbed. His final words to me were his brief set of instructions. "There's a man in the basement. He's chained up. Feed him a bucket of meat once a day. Don't talk to him. Don't get close. He's dangerous. You're the man of the house now and it's too dangerous for your mother to do." Down another step I go. His hairless, pale body began to rise slowly from the corner. still groaning his monstrous groan. His figure enlarged and teeth sharpened from years of a purely carnivorous diet. Down another step I go. I clenched the bolt cutters closer to my chest and questioned again what I was doing. It was today who I figured out who the man in my basement really was. I'd been looking for my passport amongst my mother's things. When I found my birth certificate, and his one next to mine. Down another step I go. A twin brother. One deemed too mentally unwell to warrant my parents' love and affection, but also too real to be forfeited for adoption at the cost of my religious nut parents' reputation. That was when his death was faked in infancy and he became the boy in the basement, who grew into the man in the basement. Down the final step I go. I'm going to get you out of here, Abe. I'm going to give you your life back. That was when I heard the basement door open. My mother's shrewd voice calling down. Did you think I wouldn't have heard you fumbling around finding the bolt cutters, Kane? I can't have you ruining the family's reputation. Ruining my reputation. She took a step towards the light bulb switch, preparing to shut me in the dark and lock me away forever. Lock me away with my brother. Then she tripped. Tripped on the wire I'd laid out at the top of the stairs, just for her. She fell down one step. Then another. Then another. There was a reason I didn't bring any meat down for Abe tonight. I knew there'd be something more satisfying on the menu for him. Stories number 20. Daddy, I'm thirsty. Can I have one more glass of water? Kayla asks, wearing the saddest face a 5-year-old can muster up. In a minute, okay? I answer, busy filling the bath for her. A million other things are on my mind, getting a plate of leftovers into the oven for my wife so they'll be warm when she gets off yet another late shift. The dishes. Getting Kayla's lunch packed for kindergarten. Her upcoming doctor's appointment the next in a line of many. I'm really, really thirsty, she insists, bouncing in place and stomping her foot so hard her little bunny slipper nearly comes off. All right. All right. Don't try to get in the tub by yourself, though, okay? I'll help you in a second. Okay. Up. Out. Kitchen. It's been hard. Kayla was diagnosed with diabetes last month, after a harrowing couple of weeks full of complaints of headaches, tummy aches, dizziness, potty problems, loss of coordination, vision trouble, the whole blood sugar dysregulation roller coaster. Not much seems to help. She's going to have to be evaluated even more thoroughly next week, something Angela and I are both dreading for her sake and our savings accounts. Angela's work has more opportunity for overtime than mine, so she's been picking up extra hours as much to help give us a buffer as it is to get out of the house and away from the constant reminder that our daughter is unwell. If you ask me, Kayla is always thirsty anymore. I throw a couple of ice cubes in a glass, tip the cup against the water dispenser on the fridge. The doctor said that it's common in diabetics. But it also means she's up every 4 or 5 hours to pee if she even wakes up for it at all. Kayla had been potty trained by age 3 and now we're back to as many as 4 accidents a week. She's always been an independent kid, the kind to run off to play by the pond on her own, chase me out of tea parties with her stuffed animals because there are no boys allowed, daddy. But this whole thing has seen her regress in other ways, too, turning clingy and needy. I don't mind until I do, mostly I just wish there was something I could do. She's only getting worse. Kayla? I call, I have your water. No answer. The silence makes my stomach drop. I jog back to the bathroom, all but skid inside. The glass slips out of my hand and shatters on the floor. Kayla. Her little body is limp, still dressed, bent over the side of the tub. I grab her, yank her up and flip her over and then can only turn and vomit. Drenched blonde wisps of hair hang, tangled with thick knots of meters-long white horsehair worms. They squirm free of her throat, nose, and the bloody ruins of her eyes. Writhing, frenetic. Feeling desperately for the water. Stories number 21. Every year, my mother drugs me and my siblings to prevent the end of the world. Sam. I woke to my brother's face, his eyes half-lidded. Gate you up. Every year since we were 12, Mom drugged us before the ritual to stop us escaping. Last year, Jasper puked everywhere, barely able to make the long walk up to the hot spring, and it was a lot harder with his hands tied behind his back. This year, we had a plan. Jasper was already dressed, backpack slung over his shoulder. His crown of entangled bones sat crooked on his curls, ash streaked across his cheeks. I ripped it off his head, then tore off mine. Mom must have crowned us while we were asleep. The crown had always felt like an ending. Until I was 12, I thought my crown was beautiful, my sacrifice worth billions of lives. Then I watched the 18-year-olds mercilessly sacrificed. Supposed to be cheering with my parents, hands bound in silk ribbons, I dropped to my knees and puked. The image of them never leaves my mind. Flesh dripping from bone. Skeletal screams. Jasper handed me my backpack, and we pulled Maddie from her bed. She was less likely to be chosen. Girls were meant to bear children for the ritual, but she, too, wore her crown, ash on her cheeks. Jasper had a car waiting, but before we got to it, Mrs. Benson grabbed me from behind, bony arms around my waist. Jasper was violently pulled from the driver's seat, Maddie forced to her knees. Devil children, Mrs. Benson hissed, dragging us up the mountain to join the line of teenagers stumbling toward the hot spring. Children of fire, the adults chanted, my mother forcing my crown onto my head. Beads of red streaked down my face, the jagged edge slicing into my flesh. Children of ash, they shoved me into line. All of us were ignited flame, already polluted. Ash wearing the skins of human children. Awaiting her eruption. I hit the ground, breath tangled, inches from the hot spring. I'd seen kids boiled alive, skin melting, their screams rattling in my skull. I didn't cry out when my brother was lifted by the scruff of his hair and dumped into the water, disappearing in a hiss of steam. Maddie screamed my name, dragged back by strange men. I was supposed to be next. I would be the 50th sacrifice, saving billions from Yellowstone. Somehow, I crawled back, choking on the stink of boiling flesh, clawing my way down the mountain. I ran away from my fate, abandoning my brother and sister who were reduced to steam clinging to my glasses. Sam Gallows, the 50th sacrifice, had escaped. The next morning was quiet. The lights in my hotel were off. No room service. I sat up, made coffee, and burned it. I burned the bed, then my crown. I was free. Standing in front of the window, a thick layer of gray already covered the ground below. Childish excitement filled me, and I found myself smiling. It was snowing. Stories number 22. My husband finally let me into his personal space. I can't see him the same way anymore. My husband has always been infatuated with Halloween. He's the kind to start setting out the lawn decor the moment the clock strikes midnight on September 1st. I always kind of adored that about him. His dedication to his quirky little hobby. Now, I think it's revolting. Honey, I need your help down here. Daryl shouted from the basement. Butterflies fluttered in my stomach the instant those words met my ears. Daryl had never allowed me into the basement. He claimed it was his personal space. In all honesty, I hadn't given it much thought. I assumed that was his workshop for all the detailed Halloween decorations he managed to find every year. In my 30 years on this earth, I have never seen lawn ornaments as lifelike as Daryl's. So naturally, I was giddy to see the master at work. Coming. I yelled as I clomped down the steps. The first thing I noticed was the stench. A pungent miasma immediately assaulted my nostrils, and it only grew stronger the further I descended. It took everything in me not to throw up. When I finally reached the bottom, the putrid odor was so strong that it was beginning to sting my eyes. "Daryl. What the fuck is that smell?" I spat, gagging as the words spilled from my mouth. My husband turned and tossed a dirty apron aside, before rushing over to me. A wide, nauseating grin inched across his lips as he did. "It's just over here. Close your eyes. I've got a surprise for you," Daryl insisted. He almost sounded elated. Like a child on Christmas Day, I reluctantly did as I was told. The entire thing felt off. Daryl's strange behavior, the foul odor, the whole concept of a part of our shared home being off limits. How had I not realized it sooner? Something was very wrong. "Can I open my eyes yet?" I asked, as Daryl guided me across the room. "Not yet. Closer. Closer. And, open, Dread swallowed me like a python the moment I obeyed his command. That time, I did throw up. Daryl crossed his arms and stared at his creation, barely paying me any mind. On Daryl's workbench, lay the severed heads of his parents. Their mouths hung agape, frozen in permanent screams. And those eyes. I could still see the fear trapped behind them, but I wasn't thinking about my in-laws. In that moment, one thought blared like a siren in my brain. I looked my husband dead in the face, and I asked the question that would haunt me for the rest of my life. "Daryl, if your parents are here, then who the hell is watching our son?" He beamed down at me, his Cheshire grin growing just a bit wider. He could barely contain his giggles as the words fell from his lips. "That's what I wanted to show you."